Please welcome back the director, Joachim Trier, and also the star, Gabriel Byrne. Thank you so much to both of you for being here with us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
I'm going to start with a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Since we have both of you here, I think that's probably a burning question on the part of the audience. Maybe you could clear up. One of the comic high points of the film is the clip of a young Gabriel Byrne. And I thought that might be a good place to start.
Should I start? Well, yeah, we wrote in the script, the film is so much about identity and memory and who we were and who we are and how we interpret each other. And we thought it would be interesting to have a clip of, as it said in the script, as it was humbly presented to the great Gabriel Byrne, who was the one I wanted for the part, but I couldn't write it in the script. It said in the script, a clip, an old clip of the actor playing Gene as a younger person or a younger actor, and we didn't know what the clip was. And as Gabriel, which I'm forever grateful for, accepted the role, we then went deep. We started looking, what would that clip be? And we found this wonderful film produced by Disney with Shelley Long. Gabriel plays the young, handsome doctor, as you can see. And Shelley said that it was okay for us to use it. Corbin Bernstein from LA Law was in it too. There was this kind of an interesting movie. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add something, but yeah, Disney let us use it, and you let us use it.
Why, I don't know, but anyway. No, but it's interesting in the context. I mean, we had a long discussion about this, and I didn't know whether, I really wanted to do that, because I felt that maybe it might take you out of the film or something. But what's interesting to me about it is that, yes, it's a film about memory and who we used to be and who we are now. And for that particular moment for me was poignant, because we get reminders as we grow older of how we have aged, whether it's a video or a birthday greeting or whatever. And I remember that was the very first film I ever did when I came to America, and that was 1988, I think. I didn't even know what a suture was. I had to say to the director, "What's that word mean, suture?" He said, "Well, it means when you..." Anyway, so to see myself then and to see myself now, it's like, it was poignant. And then to have Jesse Eisenberg making fun of the photograph, that was kind of fun too. But it was also, as we do, we tend to get a little sensitive about, I suppose, how we grow older. But
I think you were very generous and nice about the whole thing, to be honest with you. And you knew that the two young actors would play your sons laughing at you. I think your instinct as an actor is to always be very brave, which I admire. And you're always like, okay, if that creates an effect and we can play on that dynamic, then I'll go with it. And I felt that was what's happening. But there's a scene, I should tell them, there was a scene that was shot that's not in the film, where Gabriel's character, Gene, watches the clip on his son's computer and discovers the clip. And you hadn't seen it since you did it in 1988. And we had the camera roll on you as you were watching the clip. And that's a beautiful close-up. And it didn't make it into the film for other reasons of dramaturgy and structure, but actually it's beautiful. I remember saying, after you'd seen it for the first time in that many years, and I said, cut, and you said, that's the worst experience I've had in front of a camera, watching that.
yeah.
You're very brave.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you're great in that film. I saw the whole film. You're actually very good.
God,
Gabriel.
really? You were
Don't
the
be
other
so hard
person
on
who saw
yourself,
it? Yeah, it was one of those daffy kind of romantic Disney comedies, and they put me in as the young doctor that she falls in love with. I mean, I remember there was a dog involved, a cute dog, because it was a Disney film. I hated that dog. Yeah, but I was supposed to be kind to animals and things. So anyway, can we move off the?
Well, we move on. I do have other questions. Let's just maybe step back a bit, and Joachim, you could talk a little bit about the decision to make an English language film. You're obviously fluent in English, and you studied in London for a time. I know. Was this always something that you had wanted to do? And I'm wondering if you were thinking about American cinema as well, and not just about making a film in America, because I feel like this film, among other things, is in conversation with a certain kind of American family drama.
Yeah. No, I think, long story short, I did a Reprise, which was shown here, that we mentioned earlier this evening, and there was an interest in me going to America from certain producers to do. They gave me a lot of scripts to read that were more conventional stories, and Reprise is rather experimental in its form and editing, and they were, do that Reprise thing with this material, please. Like as if it was a spice that I could apply to the food and it would be more exciting or something. I believe that form and the way you tell something needs to be tied to the theme of what you're telling. So as Eskil, my co-writer, who I've written all the films I've done with, we were sitting down and thinking, what kind of American cinema did we grow up with? What would be a great film that we could come up with? And we thought that the character-driven, very performance-based tradition of American cinema that we loved was something we wanted to try our hand on, And I think films like, when I grew up, Kramer versus Kramer, when everyone's parents got divorced, was really relevant. Ordinary People, a great story of grief. Woody Allen movies, particularly the dramas like Interiors or Another Woman, and even high school films like The Breakfast Club by John Hughes were all great, insightful human portraits, and it turned out, and this is some of those filmmakers felt that they were connected to Bergman. Robert Redford would speak at length about Bergman when doing. I read old interviews with him when he did Ordinary People. So maybe there is a ping pong between our cultures after all. And the funny thing was, I was very inspired by Death of a Salesman for this one. And the idea, of Willie Loam and the patriarch, and kind of doing a gender reversal on a father-son story with a more modern father character. And it turns out Arthur Miller, the great American playwright, constantly talks about Ibsen, the Norwegian playwright. So maybe there is more than just Volvos under autumn leaves. Maybe there's some communication between our cultures that I've grown up on somehow.
Was this very much a conversation that you had with your actors? Was this something that...
I think we talked more about, I don't know, you guys generously gave time for rehearsals, and we didn't do so much work on the scenes. It was more about talking about character, life experience, getting to know each other, discussing methodology, kind of like how do we want to work and stuff. How do you feel about it? But I must say, Gabriel, you are very, very, which I think is great, and that's also why I call you a collaborator. You're not just a performer that I employ and you do what's on the page. You're interested in themes. You care about the content. It seems like you make bold choices in what you want to be in based on, is this a story I want to tell? And I think that's a good thing. And not all actors are like that.
Well, I found Joachim's two previous films, which you haven't seen, I think you should check them out. But there were a great many themes in this film that had a resonance, not just for me, but I think for many viewers. Like, what does it mean to be a member of a family? What does it mean if one of those family members dies without the benefit or without the blessing of last words? Where you say, well, I remember she or he said this before they left. In one of the early sequences in the film, the girl talks about, I got to spend some time with her towards the end, and that was good. But in this film, all the characters, their grief for most of the film is fractured. They live within their individual griefs, and they are haunted by the ghost of the mother. And I think, we're all haunted by ghosts in one form or another. And when I was young, I used to believe that ghosts were scary. Now I believe that ghosts are connected to memory. And just like the way the film will click into just a moment, that's how we sometimes remember people or imagine how we remember them. I also thought the theme of the mother who's absent from the family was interesting, and the reverse, where the man is at home trying to be the mother and the father. And that in the end, the climax of the film is about how those people are united together. Their grief is no longer fractured, but they are united together in the sense that although they must individually suffer their grief, the family that's left must support them. And I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh well, why didn't you use the original ending that you shot, with the baby in the garden and everything?" But I think there's something really beautiful and simple about the way the camera pulls away onto another road as the car with those three people traveling along goes to wherever they're going. And you realize that what the film has given you is the gift of being with these people for the last hour and a half and understanding them. And it's now time to leave them as they continue in the anonymous stream of traffic. And it made me realize that it's, in a way, a kind of a bittersweet ending, because how many cars do we see on the freeway? How many people do we see walking who have stories like that? And how do we come to terms with loss and grief, and that all things must pass and all people must move on out of our lives? How do we deal with that? And I think the film says that the way we deal with that is through the courage and the bravery that love gives us.
I thought maybe we can talk a bit about how some of these themes that you're both talking about relate to the language of the film. So it's a film about a sort of fractured family, but it's also a film that is fractured in its form in a way. Yeah. And I'm curious how this read on the page, because actually watching it a second time, which I did like a few days ago, it's quite remarkable just how complicated it is in terms of its movement in time and its combination of different registers of reality and reverie and memory. And I'm wondering if all that was already very mapped out at the screenplay stage, and also, Gabriel, how that read to you in terms of a screenplay, because it's remarkably fluid, like how it plays as a film.
Thank you. I guess a part of the motivation for any story that Eskil and I start writing is to try to find a particular form to express a certain emotion. So like in music, form and emotion are tied together. When you talk about formalism, very often people think you're doing something that's alienating or very artsy-fartsy, experimental. And I believe, growing up with alternative music like hip-hop and punk, that there is at the essence of something is a vibe, a mood, a certain structure. And in cinema at the moment, there's there's certain things, certain rules we're supposed to apply when we make a film. Certain sense of linearity, dramatic tension, transparency, of how you shouldn't feel the cuts, and you should be sort of doing it the right way, the proper way. And I don't come from that. I'm interested in how to try to find take some risks. So as an example, for example, I sit with Eskil one day, and we come up with this idea: is it possible in a film to have someone read from a book, and then have that voice of someone reading become the internal monologue of someone else thinking? And we put that in a drawer, and a couple of months later, we're suddenly realizing we're making a film about an adolescent young man who's infatuated with the girl in class, played by the wonderful Ruby, who's here somewhere. And Ruby then reads aloud, and I love your voice, Ruby, and I love the way that you made that scene kind of function. And we thought that, okay, so we'll have that, and this is on script stage already, before I know Ruby, before I know the wonderful Devin Druid that plays the young Conrad, and we're thinking about how can we make that scene about the mother, thereby in the form of it making almost an Oedipal connection without saying it explicitly, which means, you know, he's infatuated, it's erotic, he sees this wonderful girl in class. At the same time, he thinks about how his mother passed away. And we're making a couple of narrative points along the way that we understand he doesn't really know how she died. And on top of that, we try to add that he thought about playing hide and seek with his mother, and he realizes as a 15-year-old that she must have seen him all along. So, on the page, some people read that. Some of our generous producers believed I could pull that shit off. Others didn't, and they're not working on the film. And I pretend that I know how to do it, and we don't know. So Eskil and I do these things. We set it up, and then I'm left alone without my dear friend Eskil to try to figure it out. But then we meet the wonderful editor at the end, you know, Olivier Bouguer-Coté, who I've worked with for years, and we kind of find a way to make it work. But I like to take a risk with this stuff, and I think that filmmakers we should be responsible right now and push cinema a little bit forward every time, because everyone's talking about the death of cinema, and everyone's working in TV, and television is wonderful, yes, but we can still do fun stuff, I think, with the movies. So how did it read?
Well, I was just going to say that I think one of the hallmarks of a great director is that they can deal with the most profound subject matter and make it look very simple. It's like the way a great footballer can make soccer actually look easy, and you go out of the park and you think, oh, I could do that too. But if you look at this film, it looks like it's very simply done, but the simplicity comes as the result of a lot of conversation and a lot of elimination of choices to go for that particular choice. It's not that it's random. And I was really struck by the portrayal of the adolescent there, because I came away from that film saying, now I know where adolescents go when they go up to their rooms at 11 years of age and come out at 22. I kind of have an idea what they're at. And that secret world of adolescence that's also made more inaccessible for adults through technology, and our attempts to try to reach them through technology, which they kind of resent. But one of the things that strikes me about the film is that, and I don't know if this is particularly true so much of American film today, but it's certainly true of European film, that the risks that Joachim is talking about, for example, in that shot of Isabelle Huppert that lasts forever, it seems, and you're just mesmerized by this woman looking out of a mirror or just looking straight into you. A lot of directors and a lot of editors would have cut long before that. But the power of it is the length of it on the screen. And the way that car crash was filmed, it was beautiful and horrific. And there were moments of pure poetry, I thought, in it. And yet at the same time, it tells this linear story, and at the same time fractures off into all kinds of different realities. It read on the page as utter simplicity. But I know that it took a long time to get there, didn't it?
Yeah, we're very slow, I'm afraid, when we write. But what we also do, which I should mention, if there are people here who make movies and are maybe curious about the process, we also write out the scenes for shooting linearly, so that we can collaborate and discuss the beats and the moments and try to stay true. Because I don't believe an actor should act a cut. You know, that's not your job, and you should be allowed to focus on the content of the dynamics of the relationship. So there's a screenplay, then there are individual pages for shooting, and then we're back to the idea of the screenplay in the editing process.
It's interesting that, you know, your first film, Reprise, which Gabriel mentioned, also has a lot of this sort of same spirit of formal experimentation, of like leaping back and forth in time and shifting perspectives, and I feel like in that film it's so clearly tied to this idea of the restlessness of being young and, you know, like open to the world and excited and anxious about the future, and I feel like in this film you use some of the similar devices, but it plays so differently, because here all these devices then become about this obsessiveness that sets in around loss and mourning, and like this sense of repetition and circularity. So I mean, it's something that seems interesting that you're using like similar formal devices, but for a film that feels so different.
Yeah, I think you're right. I guess we were trying to talk about the mosaic or the fragmentation of a family where there are silences, gaps, unspoken sort of spaces between the characters, and try to find a way to be intimate with each of them. And the drama would not come out of this idea of an antagonist. I don't know quite, I'm even having difficulties pronouncing it. I don't know how to write antagonist. I really love all the characters when we write, and I'm always worried that we have to come up with a bad person to create conflicts. And I think that what is wonderful is that the actors were able to create dramatic tension without any of them having to play bad people. You know, and that's what I'm kind of interested in. But I think that the form helps that, because we, for example, see Gabriel and Devin's character, the father and the son, experience the same moments of, you know, the father following the youngest brother. And we see it from a different perspective, and we see the care of a father, yet we see the humiliation of the son. And we couldn't have done that without certain formal choices. So that was kind of the fun thing for me in putting this together.
I'd also say that Joachim, as a director of actors, is exceptional. A lot of film directors are either intimidated or don't understand, or sometimes don't care about the process of acting. But Joachim has an instinctive understanding of it, where just like the script is reduced to its simplicities, he reduces the acting performances to their simplicities. And I remember there's the scene with David Strathairn at the end where I found out that he's having an affair with my wife who's dead. I had a very different approach to that, and I thought, well, why would I not be upset there? I remember saying to Joachim, you know, this is something you find out, it's about betrayal and so forth. And he said, no, and he made me do the scene in a very simple way, which when I look on it now is absolutely right. I don't think there's any fake moments of drama in the film, or any fake moments to cut to where you kind of give the audience a little jolt. I think the acting helps, through Joachim's direction, to illuminate human behavior. It's a very good film about human behavior in its tiny moments. Moments where Jesse Eisenberg, for example, is alone in that elevator and then sees that girl, and the film is full of moments like that, full of humanity.
Thank you. I'm blushing here now. Thank you, Gabriel.
Just one more question before I open it up then. Maybe you could talk a bit about, you know, it's a film that I think Gabriel was talking about your direction of actors, but I think it is so dependent on having the right actors, which you really seem to for like every part in this film. Isabelle Huppert and, you know, Jesse Eisenberg and Devin Druid, who many of us know as the young teenage Louis, of course. And yeah, can you talk about just putting this ensemble together? I mean, it really is a true ensemble piece, I think.
No, I agree with you. This was the thrill. I'm serious about what I said earlier. It's one of the motivations for doing this film, was to be allowed to work with amazing actors like these. And I seriously, I'm very naive. And I guess this is what we talked about this. We need to sustain our naivete in this business, because there's the cards are stacked against us. The cats are stacked against us. Sorry, I was about to say something weird there. Who are the cats? The cards. I mean, you know, it's weird. It's a bit uphill to do movies, and it's hard to finance film these days. And certain studios, for example, this is not a studio film, would, for example, suggest that you work with one of the three most famous actors at that moment in time to be able to do your film. And I always come at it like, who's best for the role? You know, that should be the spirit. And I think everyone that worked on the film agreed about, you know, like, we should go for who's best. And Gabriel was top of the list, and, you know, I was looking for someone like who could be an intelligent, really smart, yet have a sense of humor, kind of late 20s, you know, Jesse Eisenberg. And Isabelle I knew from before, and I really wanted to work with her because she had seen Oslo August 31st and was very generous to talk to me, and, you know, so suddenly we started looking, and it was this kind of, okay, Gabriel can be married to Isabelle, that makes sense. Jesse could be the son, but who the hell is going to play the little brother with these the best actors, in my opinion, in the world. So my main worry going into this was like, who's going to be Conrad? You know, a 15-year-old. And in America, there is this tradition of casting 32-year-olds with squeaky voices. You know, like high school movies. And you know, even though I love John Hughes, he didn't do that. But certain other directors of that era did. But the wonderful Laura Rosenthal, the casting director, understood and read me because she's good with people, and she let me meet 200 people and feel slightly devastated, and then said, I got something you got to meet, you know, someone. And it was Devin Druid, and he was remarkable, I think. And I'm so curious to see what he's going to do now. And I think he kind of was the last puzzle. And then you started looking like a family, because that was something else. I couldn't just choose the best actor. We kind of had to make sense genetically, so to speak. But I think you all found your dynamic very well, actually. How did you experience that? I remember the first rehearsals with Jesse, for example. He was really playing that kind of on top of himself, young son, and you were trying to be the caring father, and you found the dynamic pretty quickly, I found.
Yeah, Jesse has a strange kind of vibe, you know. And, well, you know, he's Lex Luthor now. I'm looking at the thing and I'm thinking, my God, where's Batman and Superman? But he's, yeah, he had a strange energy, but a very intriguing energy too. And so did Devin. And I thought it was absolutely right for two kids who were beset by this grief. But I also thought the portrayal of the rest of the young people in the cast was also superb. Like Ruby's performance was fantastic and really believable. And you really felt, God, I remember thinking, I wish I'd met somebody like her when I was 15, who'd take in the thing from the door and walk home in the evening with me and say, yeah, I hope it went well. I hope they kept on. That's what I thought at the end of the film. But, you know, it's very delicate, because if the chemistry is wrong, the family cannot look like they're real. But Isabelle Huppert was, for somebody like you, she was one of my favorite actresses in the world, and I thought, wow, to work with her would be amazing. And there's a part of an actor's brain, of course you're involved in the scene, and of course you're doing the thing, you're listening and you're reacting and so forth, but there's a little man that sits in a little room in the back of your brain that says, that's Isabelle Huppert.
Yeah, I have that little man too.
All right, we'll take a few questions from the audience. Let's start at the back. Yep. Just repeat in case people didn't hear it. The question is about the photos in the film, Isabelle's photos, and integrating them in the film.
I did a lot of research and met a lot of war or conflict photographers. And I discovered that what I was most interested in, which I also think is about Isabelle's character, is the more contemplative, slow journalistic, humanist tradition of looking at people in these terrible situations in their lives with a certain kind of respect, I would say, and insightfulness. So I looked at a lot of war photographs, and through that period of while we were writing the script, I realized that we can get very blasé about all the images that strike us through the media and in our lives now, the immediacy of grief and terrible things that happen. But a good photograph actually has an effect, and it was kind of a tough period in my life, actually, spending time with these photos, because it's really, they do convey something, a truth, a sense of witnessing something of importance and insight. We used photos from, amongst other, the French photographer Alexandra Bollard, and some others like Paolo Pellegrin and Peter van Achtmile. Very generously, these people let us use their photos. And I think that it was interesting, because I learned something as a director from studying this, as she's talking about in the film, Isabelle's character, the idea that, you know, how do you look at the human experience of grief? Do you treat it like an example? Or do you treat it like an individual experience? Do you want to make a cliche to make a bigger point, or are you actually looking at an individual person's experience? And these questions are sort of eternal and big. And I'm fascinated. But I also want to add that we're also making a story of a mother who has this addictive personality. And several of the photographers we talked to, one of them, a female war photographer, said that she felt both very selfless in her work, but also very selfish. And the dichotomy of going out there and doing these things, it's kind of a kick they get as well, which is not only healthy, even though they do virtuous work. So I was interested in exploring that type of a character.
Yes.
You mentioned, or you talked about ghosts and memories. That was part of the Norwegian connection, Ibsen ghosts.
Question about ghosts and memory and whether there is a Norwegian connection. Ibsen.
Are there? Yeah, there are some ghosts in Ibsen, absolutely. Yeah, what can I say about that? I grew up being a big fan of Knut Hamsun more than I was of Ibsen, but I have read many of his plays, and I try to. It's strange, you know. My grandfather was a filmmaker of a different generation, a generation that felt that film was an art form to arrive late on the scene, and was somehow treated inferiorly to literature and theater, and wanted to find pure cinema. And I think I have a bit of that in me. I seldom quote, even though I just did today with Death of a Salesman, I seldom quote stage plays as an inspiration. But I guess something like Rosmersholm by Ibsen has that sense of an absent woman and the implication and aftermath. And I'm sure stuff have sifted through my childhood and education in the Norwegian school system about Ibsen. So, no, it's a relevant question. I'm afraid I'm not able to really give you a more specific answer than that.
I thought what was interesting, especially about going back to the first question about the boys seeing that scene, was kind of the negation. They didn't want to see him as the young, sexy doctor. And the relationship of the children that are children of artists, and how children often want their parents just to be parents. They want to see their life beyond what they perceive of them as mom and dad. And how much of that was conscious in the movie, and what kind of, if you could discuss that point.
Question about just the idea of children of artists. Obviously, Jean's character having been an actor and Isabelle as a photographer.
I guess I'm a bit of a sort of a believer in the notion of, as I think many people are in our culture, of the need for children and all of us throughout our life to gain some sense of autonomy and individuality away from our parents. Yet that's a terribly complicated thing in life, isn't it? I mean, it's devastating to read Freud, who says that mothers are created to be abandoned. It's heartbreaking, and you know, these things I think of relationships and family as renegotiating things time and time again. I guess what you're asking, if I understand your question, is that having cool parents, having parents that understand music or are in the arts, as you say, can create a certain sense of symbiosis with kids. But what I then found interesting was to explore gamer kids. We talked a lot about this, Gabriel and I, and Devin, who plays Conrad, is a bit of a gamer. He sits online at night and has friends in New Zealand or even Norway, probably, like that he games with at strange hours of the night, you know. And that's a different type of rebellion that we're seeing these days, which is not about creating like my generation or Gabriel, we would probably create a strange guitar sound that would piss off our dads. But now it's not about that, because dad loves that strange guitar sound, and the kids create an alternate world, an alternate universe with avatars and a different sense of reality altogether that we see sort of comically dad try to enter into, and which, so there is something about generations right now and that I find kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, I just, I think that's a really interesting question, because, that quotation from Freud. I mean, the Buddhists have a dictate, which is that a child's first step is a step away from you. In other words, the recognition that the job of the parent is to see the child into adulthood and not to try to hold on to them. But I think children, no matter how much they rebel against their parents, they want to keep them private within the four walls of the house. What fame does is it projects the parents out into the entire world. And for children who are who have parents who are famous or, well known, it creates a dilemma because your parent is your private parent, but everybody else knows them. So it's conflicting for the child. Like, what is the job of the parent? The job of the parent is to be the parent, not to be somebody that everybody in the entire world can have a part of. Because if you as a child can't claim your own parent, like, what can you really claim? And when that parent is sent out there in many shapes and forms, not to mention anything, but it just reminded me at the moment, there's a famous singer at the moment who's having a problem with her kid, who's now said, I don't want to live with you anymore, I want to live with my father. And she has to go through the public drama of trying to get her child to come back to her, or the father has to go through the drama of trying to get the child to stay with him. But in the middle is the child probably having really conflicted emotions about who his mother is. And in this film, these kids have a famous mother who's a photographer who's been taken from them by war and by her job, and she's famous. She gets articles written about her in the New York Times. And so getting to know your parents, if you ever really do get to know your parents, I don't know if you do, but getting to know them privately is a hell of a job. Getting to know them in the public sphere is even more torturous. And it's a really good question. And that makes sense in a way of that scene you're talking about, because it's a rejection of him as that. I don't want you to be that. I want you to be my father. Nothing. I don't want you to be anybody like that's available to the world. Does that kind of yeah? It was a long-winded answer, but you know.
It's a question about the recurring theme of addiction in Joachim's films.
Yeah, I think that Oslo, August 31st, and this film are companion pieces in some sense. One is a very intimate portrait of someone who's lost in a sense of narcissistic depression, to say it in a very crude way, and this one, I guess, is dealing with the aftermath and the surroundings. But I do feel very close to the characters that do not sustain their life in both films, in the sense that I think most people that that do something creative are very it's difficult to talk about, but you know, a lot. Okay, so put it this way: a lot of directors that maybe in their 50s or 60s often make the film about the cop or the robber that is so addicted to their job that they can't deal with the family. You know, a wonderful film I love, like Heat by Michael Mann, is about dysfunctional families. And Al Pacino says, I gotta sustain my edge. You know, I can't be with you, he says to his wife. And, you know, I gotta find the cop. And, you know, I know I gotta find the robber. You know, he finds Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro has the same problem, so they bond. There we are, you know. I'm trying to kind of do a different version of the difficult dichotomy of life and art, and trying to sustain relationships in the middle of being ambitious, or not even ambitious as a sense of fame or attention, but just because that's what you know how to do. That's how you're coping with your problems, your time, your sense of self-worth, all that stuff. I know a lot of people like that, so I care about that. Then, yeah, I've made some quite melancholic existential portraits, and that's for many private reasons, and also for reasons of I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but you know, when I was a kid, I understood that life is short, and I'm an atheist, and you know, what do we do with our time? I care. It's what I think about all the time, and it's that pressure and the weight of time sometimes can be almost unbearable. But I think through making films, life feels pretty good at the moment. So I'm optimistic. I hope this film also shows, as to answer your question more specifically, that in the continuation of what I do, I think this is perhaps my most optimistic film so far. So the next one is going to be about something slightly different, I think. But thank you for your question.
We have time for a final question, if there are. Yes. I guess you sort of already touched on this, but like, are there personal experience that informed these films?
Several. But I'll tell you what. Here's my take on it. I'm interested in the amazing opportunity I'm feeling right now, sitting here with you and having done something I've worked on for 6 years, where I express in much more contemplative way and in a much more crafty way, where I'm able to control the ambivalence and the complexity of my statement, how I talk about what I really care about personally, than I am in talking about my private life. And maybe I'm old-fashioned that way. And I know I'm not insinuating that you're digging into my private life by your question. It's a relevant one. Yes, this comes from many things, and that process is rather chaotic. I actually, some things are transferred from an experience of family, yet when my parents see this film, they're moved by it and they don't feel attacked by, oh, this is my father or this is my mother, or, this stuff is complicated. We're two people writing, and the wonderful thing is I write with one of my best friends, Eskil Vogt. And we're both real film nerds, but we're also really good friends for more than 20 years. So we sit and we talk and we share our thoughts on life and experiences, and stuff sifts out. And sometimes we come up with an idea we both love. We write it down, and at the premiere of the film, someone comes up to us and says, oh my God, this moved me because of a personal experience. And we look at each other, shit, yeah, this is also very personal to us. We didn't really realize. It's a process of discovery. It's not as I set out to portray something specific from my biographical experience. It's a chaotic process, and I'd love to keep staying like that, chaotic.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for, but
thank you.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.